Hello Army, welcome back to K Heart Channel. The cameras were still rolling, but something was already breaking. What the world saw was just another flawless moment. Lights, visuals, perfection. But behind that illusion, right after the chaos of the swim, shoot, something went terribly wrong and no one was supposed to notice. Taehyung didn't say a word, not when his energy started fading, not when his body began to give up. Not even when the silence around him grew heavier than the noise of the set itself. But someone noticed Jungkook, AT first. It was just a glance, quick, uncertain. Then it turned into something else.
Concern, panic.
The kind you can't fake. The kind that spreads fast but stays unspoken. Staff members tried to keep things moving. The schedule couldn't stop. But Jungkook's eyes never left him, because what they were witnessing wasn't just exhaustion. IT was a breaking point. Seconds before stepping into the Arirang live shoot, Taehyung stood there, still, quiet, but completely drained. And in that moment, behind the cameras, behind the smiles, behind everything fans were about to see, something real happened. Something raw. Something no one was meant to see. And if you look closely, you'll realize this wasn't just a performance anymore. What followed didn't explode into chaos. It was quieter than that. Far more dangerous. The kind of moment that slips through unnoticed unless you're looking for it. The set kept moving. Lights adjusted. Staff shifted positions. Schedules tightened like nothing had happened. But beneath that mechanical rhythm, something fragile was unraveling in real time. Taehyung's posture changed first, subtle, almost invisible. Shoulders heavier, breathing uneven. The kind of fatigue that doesn't come from a long day, but from something deeper that had been building long before the cameras ever turned on. The aftermath of the swim, shoot was still clinging to him. Water, pressure, repetition, the physical strain hidden behind aesthetic perfection. It wasn't just a concept. It demanded everything: control, endurance, precision. And somewhere between takes, between resets, between pushing past limits that no one openly acknowledged, something inside him had crossed a line. By the time they transitioned toward the Arirang live segment, the energy around him had already shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough for headlines, but enough. His movements slowed in a way that didn't match the pace of the room. His focus drifted for fractions of a second too long. The kind of delay most people would dismiss, but not someone who knew him well enough to notice the difference between tired and not okay. Jungkook noticed IT started as awareness, then sharpened into something heavier. His attention kept pulling back, again and again, like instinct refusing to let go. While others stayed locked into their roles, he was watching the gaps, the spaces between Taehyung's movements, the hesitation before each step, the way his composure looked intact but felt hollow underneath. There was no interruption, no dramatic pause, just a growing tension that no one addressed, because stopping wasn't an option. The countdown toward going live had already begun, and everything was expected to fall into place. It always did. It had to. That was the unspoken rule behind every performance, every broadcast, every moment presented to the world as effortless. But effortlessness is often the most carefully constructed illusion. As the final preparations closed in, Taehyung stood in position, perfectly aligned with what the camera would soon capture. From the outside, nothing was wrong. The styling was flawless. The expression was controlled. The image was exactly what it needed to be, but the stillness around him felt different now. Too still, the kind that doesn't come from calm, but from holding everything together with whatever strength is left. And then it became harder to ignore, not visibly. Not in a way that would force the room to stop, but in the way his body seemed to resist him, even in small, controlled movements. A slight shift of weight that took longer than it should. A breath drawn just a little too deep, like oxygen wasn't enough anymore. The kind of signals that pass unnoticed unless someone is already watching closely. Jungkook wasn't looking anywhere else. There was no hesitation in that focus now.
No uncertainty.
Just a silent recognition that something had gone too far, even if no one was saying it out loud. His awareness cut through the routine, through the noise, through the pressure to keep everything moving forward like nothing was wrong, because something was. And it was getting worse by the second. The cameras weren't live yet, but the illusion had already begun. Staff moved faster, tighter, preparing for the exact second everything would switch from behind the scenes to broadcast perfection. The gap between those two worlds was closing, and Taehyung was standing right on the edge of it, holding on, barely. The distance between exhaustion and collapse is smaller than anyone wants to admit. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give warnings loud enough to stop everything. It just builds, quietly, until there's nothing left to push against it. And in that moment, it was clear he was reaching that point. Jungkook shifted closer, not enough to draw attention, not enough to disrupt anything, but enough to be there if something broke. The seconds stretched longer than they should have. Every movement felt heavier, slower, like time itself was dragging under the weight of what no one wanted to acknowledge. The set was ready. The broadcast was seconds away. Everything was exactly where it needed to be, except him. Taehyung's composure held, but it didn't feel stable anymore. It felt forced, fragile, like a surface barely containing what was underneath. The kind of control that looks perfect right until the moment it isn't. And then something shifted, not loud, not dramatic, but final, the kind of shift that changes everything without warning. Jungkook saw it instantly, before anyone else could react, before the cameras could capture anything, before the illusion had a chance to break in front of the world. And in that split second, one silent decision had to be made: keep the performance going or break everything to stop what was about to happen. And no one else moved, and no one else understood what that moment meant. But Jungkook did, because what was happening in front of him wasn't just exhaustion anymore. It was the point of no return. And what he chose to do next never made it to the broadcast. The moment didn't shatter outward. It folded in on itself. Whatever shift had just passed through Taehyung didn't erupt into something visible enough to stop the room, but it left a fracture beneath the surface that refused to settle. The kind of fracture that keeps everything looking intact until it doesn't. The countdown continued. Every second tightened the pressure, sealing the space between reality and performance. Staff members moved with precision, unaware that something irreversible had already begun to unfold right in front of them. The broadcast was seconds away. There was no room for disruption, no space for hesitation. But Taehyung's body was no longer following the script. It was subtle at first, too subtle for anyone who wasn't watching with intent. His balance shifted again, not enough to stumble, but enough to feel unstable. His breathing didn't match the pace of the moment. It lagged behind, uneven, like his body was struggling to keep up with what was being demanded of it. And still, he held his position. Still, he stayed silent. The discipline was there. The control was there. Years of training, of pushing past limits, of ignoring signals that most people would have already surrendered to. It was all there, holding him upright when everything inside was telling him to stop. But discipline has limits. Even if no one talks about them, Jungkook's focus narrowed completely now. The rest of the room blurred into background noise, into movement that no longer mattered. There was only one thing left in his field of vision. The way Taehyung's composure was beginning to slip in places only someone close enough would recognize. A delayed reaction, a microsecond too slowed, a stillness that didn't feel intentional anymore. It was enough. Enough to confirm what instinct had already been screaming. Something was wrong in a way that couldn't be fixed once the cameras went live. The signal for standby was given. Final positions locked in. The world outside that room was seconds away from seeing a perfectly controlled image, another flawless appearance, another moment that would be consumed, praised, replayed. No one on the other side would ever question what it took to get there, but inside that room, the cost was becoming impossible to ignore. Taehyung's fingers tensed slightly, barely noticeable, but it didn't go unseen. The energy around him felt thinner now, stretched to a point where even standing still looked like effort. The strength that had been holding everything together was fading, not dramatically, but steadily. And then it happened again. That shift, stronger this time than a flicker in his stability that lasted less than a second. But it was enough to break the illusion for the one person who refused to look away. Jungkook moved, not fast enough to cause alarm, not sudden enough to draw attention, but deliberate, closing the distance just slightly more, positioning himself in a way that wouldn't be questioned, but would be there if everything gave out. It was calculated without looking calculated, controlled, just like everything else in that room. Except this wasn't part of the performance. This was protection. The final seconds before going live stretched into something unbearable. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on everything at once. Every expectation, every camera, every unseen audience waiting on the other side. It all converged into that single moment. And right at the center of it, Taehyung was holding on by almost nothing. There was no dramatic collapse, and immediate fall. Just a visible strain now, creeping closer to the surface, threatening to expose what had been hidden for too long. His composure didn't break completely, but it cracked. Just enough to make it real, just enough to make it dangerous. Jungkook saw the exact second it reached its limit, the exact second where pushing forward would mean risking something far worse than a disrupted broadcast. And this time, he didn't wait. The movement was small, but it changed everything to a step closer. A shift in position. A silent intervention that looked natural to everyone else, but wasn't. It was intentional, protective, immediate, enough to anchor what was starting to slip. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual. The formation still looked clean. The spacing still made sense. The visual remained untouched, but behind that illusion, everything had changed, because now, Taehyung wasn't standing there alone anymore. And somehow, that made the difference between holding on and completely losing control in front of everything. The live signal was seconds away, and O1 stopped IT'd, and O1 delayed it. And maybe that was the most dangerous part of all, because what was about to be broadcast to the world was built on a moment that almost didn't survive long enough to reach it. And the truth behind it was already starting to slip through the cracks. The red light came on, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet signal that everything had crossed the line from hidden to seen. And in that instant, the entire room shifted into performance mode. Every movement sharpened, every expression locked into place, every detail aligned with what millions would expect to see. Control, confidence, perfection. The transition was seamless, almost too seamless, because what the cameras captured wasn't the full truth. Taehyung stepped into it like he always did.
Precise.
Measured, composed in a way that made everything look effortless. To anyone watching, there was no hesitation, no visible crack, no sign that just seconds before, something had nearly gone wrong. But the illusion required constant effort, and that effort was draining what little he had left. His movements were flawless, but heavier now. Each step carried a weight that didn't belong on stage. Each breath was controlled, but just barely. The performance wasn't breaking, but it wasn't stable either. That IT was being held together, frame by frame. And Jungkook never stepped out of sync, but he never stepped away either. Every position he took, every adjustment he made, it all revolved around one silent objective: stay close enough. Close enough to catch what couldn't be seen. Close enough to react before anyone else realized something was wrong. To everyone else, it looked like chemistry. Coordination. The kind of natural alignment expected after years of performing together. But it wasn't just that. IT was calculated, protective, constant. There was a moment, brief, almost invisible, when Taehyung's focus slipped again. Not enough to disrupt the performance. Not enough for the audience to notice. But enough for Jungkook. Enough to confirm that whatever had been holding him together before the broadcast was fading fast. The distance between them closed again, slightly, carefully, as if adjusting to choreography, but the intention behind it was something else entirely. Something urgent. Something that couldn't afford to fail in front of a live audience. Because now there was no safety net. NO reset. NO second take. Every second that passed was permanent, and Taehyung kept going, not because it was easy, not because he was fine, but because stopping wasn't an option once the world was watching. That was the unspoken rule. The one no one needed to say out loud. The one that demanded everything, even when there was nothing left to give. The performance moved forward, segment by segment, moment by moment, and the strain began to show, not in obvious ways, but in the smallest fractures. A delay that lingered half a beat too long. A shift in balance that didn't fully recover. A breath that came sharper than it should have. Tiny things, but they added up. And Jungkook was tracking all of it. There was no panic on his face. No visible concern. Just precision. Just awareness sharpened to a level that didn't belong in a normal performance. He was waiting, watching, ready, because the line Taehyung was walking now was getting thinner with every passing second. And then, It happened. Not a collapse. Not yet. But something dangerously close, a moment where his stability faltered in a way that couldn't be disguised as part of the performance. A flicker of imbalance that lasted just long enough to be real, long enough to matter. The kind of moment that, if it stretched even a second longer, would have shattered everything. Jungkook reacted instantly, not in a way that broke the illusion, but in a way that reinforced it, a shift, a reposition, a presence that looked intentional, like part of the flow, like something planned. But it wasn't. It was intervention. And it worked. Barely. Taehyung steadied. The performance continued. The cameras kept rolling, and the audience saw none of it. They saw perfection. They saw control. They saw exactly what they came for. But behind that, the truth was unraveling faster than anyone realized. Because whatever was holding Taehyung together now was running out, and the performance wasn't over yet. Not even. Close. The final segment loomed ahead, heavier than everything before it. The energy required, the precision demanded, the expectation waiting on the other side of that final moment. All of it was still coming, and Taehyung had already given more than he had. Jungkook knew it. He could see it in the way the cracks were spreading, even as the surface remained intact. He could feel the timing slipping closer to something irreversible, and this time, there might not be enough left to hold it together. The performance pushed forward anyway, because it always does. But what no one watching could see was how close it was to breaking completely before it ever reached the end. The final segment began to close in like something inevitable. There was no slowing down now. No room left to adjust the pace. No space to recover what had already been drained. Everything was building toward the ending the audience expected. Tight, powerful, unforgettable. But behind that expectation, something far more fragile was barely holding. Taehyung moved into position again, every step controlled, every expression locked in place. From the outside, nothing had changed. If anything, it looked even stronger, sharper, more intense, more focused. But intensity can hide exhaustion better than anything else. And this time, it was hiding too much. The strain had reached a point where it no longer came in small, manageable cracks. It was spreading beneath everything, pressing against the surface with nowhere left to go. The kind of pressure that doesn't release quietly, the kind that forces something to give. Jungkook felt it before he fully saw it. That shift in rhythm again, but deeper, heavier. Not just a flicker anymore. Not something that could be corrected with a subtle adjustment or a careful reposition. This was different. Taehyung's timing slipped, not visibly enough to break formation, but enough to throw off the internal balance that had been holding him together. His body followed through, but without the same stability, without the same control, and for the first time, it didn't recover immediately. A fraction of a second stretched longer than it should have, long enough for the risk to become real. Jungkook closed the distance again, this time with less room to disguise it. Still controlled, still aligned with the flow of the performance. But the intention was clearer now, sharper, more urgent. He wasn't just staying close anymore. He was bracing, because the line had been crossed. Taehyung kept moving, but the effort behind it was undeniable now. Every motion demanded more than his body was willing to give. Every second forward felt like pushing against something that was already pulling him down. And still, he didn't stop. The final sequence built higher, faster, louder.